Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Powerful Man Show. I am your host, Doug Holt, with my co-host, Tim, the Powerful Man Matthews. What's going down, brother?
Yeah, I'm doing well. Doing very well indeed. It's interesting. Obviously, we're putting together the new activation method trainings, right?
Yep.
And one of the things is we're redoing the clean slate training, updating it with a lot of the successes the men have had and what made those less successful. So anyway, this morning, Doug posted in the coaches Slack channel saying, "Hey guys, could you give me some idea of what has been the pattern in the letters that has been successful versus the letters that have been unsuccessful?" And all the coaches have said, "Hey, I'm struggling to find the one that was unsuccessful," which is great. But there's tons of examples of the ones that were just knocked it out of the park, which is just awesome. All about how powerful the clean slate is.
Yeah, it's a testament to the process, right?
Yeah.
When you have a process that's proven time and time again, it's like I use the recipe analogy a lot. It's like having your go-to recipe that every time I make it, I know exactly what the temperature of the steak needs to be. I know exactly how to do it. And I exactly the seasoning. And every time I do it, it's a 10 out of 10. Everybody loves it. The triadic connection, which part of it is what you're talking about, the clean slate method, is, it's a proven process. And it's just one of the processes the guys go through in the activation method.
Yeah, it's fantastic. You got to give some credit to the coaches as well. They guide them to doing it. There's usually a couple of revisions that take place in the letter. But yeah, it's, I think, a combination of that, the process, it's proven time and time again with some nice guidance too. It's a recipe for success.
Yeah, it really is. Which is interesting because what I want to talk about today, Tim, is what to do when you've taken a few steps backwards. So I'll set the scene. Okay. And this happens to everybody, right? Not just to one person or a few people, it happens to everybody. So you're doing well, right? You've reconciled with your wife. Maybe things are just better at the home or what have you. And it could be another area, but specifically we're going to talk about relationships because that's what we do at The Powerful Man. We help married businessmen, get their love, trust, and respect back in their wife's eyes. And it usually brings intimacy to the bedroom. But sometimes we're guys and things happen. And sometimes you feel like, I reacted or I yelled at her or I exploded or, you can have a bad business deal. Something's going wrong in your business. You're stressed out. You go home. Your wife does a shit test on you, right? Just testing her. She's having a bad day. The two of you collide and you're up to maybe you say some things that aren't as cool. You don't handle things as well. And now your wife is angry, cold, resentful, and hurt, right? And she starts being hurtful back to you. And that can feel at that moment like all things are lost. All that progress I did, all those things that I did to get to this point are all for naught. But that's not the case. So, Tim, that's what I want to talk about today.
Okay. Yeah. I think the first thing to mention really is, look, you're going to mess up. I think oftentimes when we experience a shift and it's new, it's also exciting at that point as well, right? You then start to experience results that you've never had before or you've not had for a long time. Life seems wonderful. Life seems great as everything is fixed and it's perfect. And for the most part, it is. Like, it's so much better than it was. And what used to be your ceiling then becomes your floor. And then, it can just be the norm, right? Until you then go again and again and again, right? And in that process, I think how some of the guys kind of trip themselves up is they expect perfection. Whereas a relationship and the progress within the relationship or whatever territory we want to talk about is always going to be imperfectly perfect, right? It just always is. There's always going to be course corrections, kind of like, a plane that takes off, right? It's off course 90% of the time. Requires the most amount of energy to get it off the ground, right? But then once it's up, hits cruising altitude, becomes easier, off course corrects, and it has a navigation system that constantly guides it and brings it back on course. And if you're on that plane, you don't really know, right? For the most part, all you care about is you get off the plane at the destination that you're supposed to be at, right? And I think for some people, when these course corrections happen and maybe they veer a little bit off course, they stop doing the basics. They stop doing what they've been doing that got them into the position in the first place because they start beating themselves up. They start worrying. They start panicking. They blow it out of proportion. And all of a sudden, the plane lands early in a destination that it's not supposed to be at because their internal guidance system has turned off. They've stopped doing the things that nurture and cultivate that within them. And by default, it often makes it worse. And honestly, there's I don't mean this with any to be condescending, but there's no need. I get that it can be easy to want to do that and beat ourselves up in that way, right? But there's also no need because it's always going to ebb and flow and change. And it's about getting back to the basics so you can get back on track, back on the right path quickly and easily, and take the lessons that you've learned from that and share them. You can always share them with your partner. This is one of the reasons for me why I love the weekly check-in with Amelia. Make it fun and light, and might be driving somewhere where we do it, might be walking, might be cooking, whatever, right? It doesn't have to be this formal thing. But one of the questions in there is, what have you learned about yourselves, each other, or sex or intimacy this week? I love that question because if I've learned things about myself, like I've fallen off track or whatever, I'll share that lesson. I'll share what I've learned. I'll share it, right? And what I found is when I personally share what I'm learning about myself and how, imperfect we all are and I am, it just helps to alleviate the shame as well. There's nowhere to hide. I don't have to hide behind it, pretending like I'm always knocking it out of the park. It's why we talk about in the activation method, hit singles, hit singles, hit singles, hit singles, hit singles every day, because those singles add up into the home runs. It's not about trying to swing big and hit a home run right out the gate, right? Don't need to do that. So the overarching thing is I've stopped doing the basics and I just get to get back to it.
Yeah. And when you think about when this situation happens, first of all, it happens to everybody. I think a lot of time as men, we think, oh, we put in the work. Now we're done with that. Check off the box. Let's move forward. But it's just like shit tests. They're going to come all the time. You're always progressing. And when you're doing anything, you're always progressing. I don't care if it's exercise, business, or what have you. There's going to be setbacks. And it's how you handle those setbacks that becomes more and more telling. Now, what I mean by that is if you're new to it, you do something, anything, and you get a setback, the tendency is to react, really blow it up because you're like, I'm moving forward. I was doing so well, but now I feel like I'm in a rut. It's the first time you've been in this rut, the rut seems really big. However, if you're continuously doing the work, if you're continuously doing the basics, you're continuously progressing, you get a setback, you realize, it's just a setback. It's temporary. All right, let's go back to what I know works. Am I deviating anywhere from the situation? What do I get to learn from this and add to my toolbox so I could do it? So if there's a setback in your relationship, maybe like I set the scene, you snapped at your wife, whatever, boom. If you've been through the program, you do a clean slate method. Boom, right? You clean it up. So you level those scales again, use the hidden motives technique to come in and make those experiences better, right? And look at where you're reacting and where that resistance is. And a lot of times where this resistance is for us guys is figuring out where those triggers are. Like I love that you and Amelia have this conversation you were talking about. And what you want to find out is where's the root of this coming from? And it may be nothing, maybe 100% your wife. And that's possible, right? But oftentimes, more often than not, we play a part as partners in the story. And our job is not to find out what her issues are, because they're hers. Our job is to figure out, okay, where's my role in this? And if you truly believe and you're 100% certain that you have no role, then you set boundaries, very clear define boundaries. But for me, at least, most of the time I'm in this situation, I realize I'm getting triggered or reacting, and it has to do with my stuff. It doesn't have
Yeah.
to do with hers as much. And what we see often, guys, as Tim was saying, is when men enter this state and we as coaches get on a call with them, one of the first things we ask them is, are you doing your alpha rise and shine? Are you doing your alpha decompression cheat sheet? What's your COIL score? COIL is short for chart of intentional living. And the guys are like, no, I stopped doing all those things. Why'd you stop doing them? Because everything was so good. Okay. Those things got you to everything is so good. So you stopped them, human nature. Now let's pick those back up. And instead of stopping them, let's keep them moving.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? The work is done. The work never ends. Like, just not as long as you want to grow anyway, right? It just doesn't. Imagine thinking about your business. Oh, well, I don't need to work on the business. It's just going to grow by itself. You kind of know that it's not. Even if you've got someone running the company, you're still going to have conversations with the person running the company. And you're going to have to, there's going to be an involvement from you more than likely. Otherwise, it's not going to grow, right? Likewise, anyone else within the company just isn't going to grow on its own without anyone doing anything, including yourself, right? It's the same way with your kids. Right? You're not going to raise great kids by leaving them to raise themselves. So same here. I think as well, some guys get addicted to chaos. Honestly, I think they've been in chaos for so long that it's such a wired pattern that sometimes when things are going so well, they almost sabotage and almost they know they're not doing the basics. They know that they're stopping. They know that the drinking's creeping in. They know it. They can see it. They're aware of it. And some guys, they hit an upper limit with how good life is. The peace and the joy and the abundance that they're experiencing for some is so unfamiliar. It's uncharted waters. Like they're being that lighthouse so well that they're withstanding any storm, that it kind of feels a bit weird. And sometimes it feels a bit kind of boring to a degree because they're just in such a good groove. So the easiest way that they know how to break that is to create some chaos. And that might come with the little habits that creep back in that then lead to the sharp word to the wife. Because in reality, the likelihood is, right, if there's been this bust up in the relationship and the wife is really holding on to it, there's probably been a few things going on in the lead up to this that have probably been putting a little bit of mud on that glass. And then there's been the final straw, and it's like, it's less likely that it just comes out of nowhere. Because typically a guy that's on the path, doing the basics, following his plan, right? He cleans it up quickly, right? Because he's coming from that place of fullness. He's the wolf, the lighthouse. So even if he does mess up, he's going to quickly clean it up. Whereas a guy that's stopping doing the basics because he thinks his work is done, that maybe is reaching a bit of an upper limit, allowing those old habits to creep back in, is less likely to clean it up as quick.
So the upper limiting is exactly what I was going to add to that is, one of the things I'd ask myself, guys, here, or I do ask myself is this a pattern? Right? Am I going forward then constantly, things are good. They were so good. And now we got an argument. Things are so good. And now this happened. If it's a pattern, odds are you're upper limiting. What does that mean? That means you have a view of yourself in your subconscious mind of what you're capable of, what you deserve in all categories, business, relationships. That's why a lot of times for guys, no matter how much money they make, their bank account is always the same, right? That's what they believe they should have. Hard to swallow because people will be like, hey, Doug, like the first time I heard this, Tim, I'd be like, dude, there's no way that I want my relationship to be like this, like we're fighting. But the truth is, for a lot of people, excuse me, as you're progressing forward, if it's a pattern, Like, wait a minute, this is too good. The other shoe's got to drop here. And then they create that for themselves. They stop doing things. I'll use an analogy that most all people can understand. If you're all of a sudden you're getting fit, right? And you start leaning out, you start building muscle as a man, then what happens for a lot of people, most people actually, they go, you know what? I'm starting to get in shape, starting to look good. Clothes are fitting looser. I'm going to have a few pints, a few beers. I'm going to have some pizza. And they start self-sabotaging. And the thing is they end up at the exact same friggin' weight again. It's crazy. Maybe a couple pounds over, maybe a couple pounds under, but it's usually the same weight or a couple pounds over. And they start the slog again, trying to lose the weight. They start going, self-sabotage, and they go right back to the same weight. People are like, oh, it must be my metabolic set point. Nope. That is your psychological set point now. It's not your metabolic. Your body is not like, hey, I really hope you're 50 pounds fatter than you need to be. No. But you have set that in your own identity of where you should be. Now, we do this in our relationships. We have a master course on unconscious commitments that the guys go through. Tim, I'm a raving fan of it because I just see it work so much in my life and also the men that we coach. But guys, you want to catch yourself in this pattern. Is this a pattern that's happening to you? And we all go through it, guys. Tim has an upper limiting belief of where Tim and his relationship should be. I have one of my relationship. And Tim and I get to self-examine that and examine with our partners if we choose to. Are we upper limiting? Is what we're doing a pattern? If it's a pattern, does it serve us? Yes or no? Obviously, in this case, no. Okay, we get to change it. And this is where we as men get to do the work on our ends to lead our families forward and take that next level. And a lot of men, in fact, I would almost say all the guys that go through the activation method, that go from deer to wolf, that go from deactivated to activated, right? They have completely raised the ceiling that they used to have, right? As Tim said, we say it often, is your old ceiling becomes your new floor and you just catapult above that. But we get to keep doing that process. And part of it has to do with the awareness that you're going to upper limit. You just are. And when you do, over time, like we said at the beginning, you start to celebrate it. Sweet. Now when I'm upper limiting, I know how to raise this and make this ceiling my new floor. Now I get to do it. And that can be an exciting thing. It's like getting sore at the gym. Like if you're just starting to work out, getting sore sucks. You're like, oh my gosh, I can't walk up the stairs or whatever. But if you've been a gym rat or you've been in the gym for any length of time, you get sore. You're like, all right. Kind of almost like the soreness as you go up the stairs because you know growth and change is happening. You know that you're getting stronger. And that could be the same thing here. If you fight with your wife or your partner, good, awesome. Now I can grow. We can get closer through this. We can raise the bar. That's a paradigm shift. It's a different way of looking at it. But you got to have the tools. You got to go from deactivated to activated, and then you got to do the basics. Nothing to say. Love it. Tim's
It's not in my head. I think it's just so spot on. I don't want to add anything to it. It's spot on.
Gentlemen, I want to remind you guys that we all go through this situation. So if you find yourself in this, and guys going through the program find themselves from time to time of like, things are going so well. I'm killing it in all 5 territories. 5 territories, again, are self, health, wealth, relationships, and business. Killing all 5 territories. Then all of a sudden, my wife and I got in a fight. Then all of a sudden, and again, almost all the time, we ask them, are you doing the basics? Yes or no? Usually it's a no. Then we get to look at this limiting belief, and then we get to build from that. And the men that do it, right, they've gone through the activation method, they're doing the work, build it in such a manner, their old ceiling becomes their new floor, and they're able to up level in a huge way that affects their entire life. So gentlemen, as we say, if you find yourself in that situation and you have a moment of insight, take massive action. Don't just go from podcast to podcast. We want you to be one of the 1% that actually takes action in something you learn and digest. And until then, we'll see you next time on The Powerful Man Show.